Hi everyone, Jason here from spiritualbabies.net. You've joined us for show 10, chapter 9 in the book of Hosea. We are cracking on with that in this show. You can watch the previous ones. There's a playlist that's created now. So at the moment, I think you can sit down and watch nearly 5 hours of content, which is pretty impressive. We are being led through this by Rabbi Joshua Neely, who's over in Florida, and I think at some point we need to do an interview and you can tell us about your synagogue and where you are, and maybe people that are close to you can come and visit. That would be a kind of cool thing to do.
That's very cool. I love that.
So we are going to carry on. If you remember the last episode we did, the previous to last one, we were talking a lot about ovens and bread, and there seemed to be a definite little towards baking and and that kind of theme. And in this, there's we're talking again a little bit about bread later on, and I'm curious to know whether there's a link there. But we're going to just jump into verse 1 straight away. Rejoice not, O Israel, on joyous occasions, like the peoples, for you have strayed from your God. You love a harlot's hire on all threshing floors of corn. That's a tongue twister. Now, I try to pick stuff up as I go along, and because we've covered this before, I know that you love a harlot's hire is actually kind of reflecting you love the money that a harlot receives, making Israel in this instance the harlot. Did I get that right?
Right. You like getting paid for whoring yourself out.
Right.
And that's, kind of what's going on here. The first of all, a little agricultural recap. The threshing floor. What's happening here is the idea that women, unfortunately, especially who were very vulnerable in the ancient world, they would go from threshing floor to threshing floor, selling their services for cash.
Wow.
For grain at the time, right? So in order to survive, they would literally whore themselves at different threshing sites, just sleeping with the workers there in order to be given some of the grain. And that's the metaphor that's being used here for Israel, is that Israel has just gone whoring after all these other gods, and also, as we've talked about in previous chapters, after other nations, looking for allies and support, rather than actually doing the right thing.
I hadn't heard that before about the, people selling their bodies for food in that way. That's kind of desperate.
It's kind of desperate. It's one of the reasons why widows were such a protected class in Jewish law and mentioned so often as being people that are most vulnerable, because they often didn't have access to land, which was the main source of a livelihood, and therefore they had one thing to sell if they couldn't find kindness and support, and that was themselves.
The oldest profession.
Unfortunately, yes.
Okay. The threshing floor and the wine cellar shall not feed them, and fresh wine shall fail her. So obviously this is kind of this is a spiritual connotation there. It's an allegory, and it's saying that by whoring themselves out, they're not going to get the response or the payment that they were hoping for.
Exactly right. And this goes whether or not it's the idea of going after their idols, and the idols are not going to pay off because obviously they've got nothing to give. But the other side is when it's talking about alliances, is that these alliances are not going to save Israel either.
They shall not stay in the land of the Lord, but Ephraim shall return to Egypt, and in Assyria they shall eat unclean, and food is in brackets, which tells me it's not in the text, but it's read to mean they shall eat unclean food.
Right.
Are they talking about a physical move? Because I know we've spoken before about their relationships with Egypt and Assyria, and about how sometimes that was just kind of an outreach thing, or them looking for an ally or kind of political and social help.
No, this in particular, because of the beginning about not being settled, not being living in the land of Israel, is definitely a warning that they will be refugees in the land of Egypt and land of Assyria, which, of course, we know, unfortunately, did come to pass.
And the unclean food, I guess, is kind of it's not even a metaphor. It's like a physical representation of them moving away from their faith and their religion and their Torah.
It's awfully hard to get, kosher slaughter when you're living in the middle of, the Nineveh and other places in Assyria.
They shall not pour libations of wine to the Lord. They will not please him. Their sacrifices are like bread of mourners to them. All those who partake thereof become contaminated, for their bread is for themselves. It should not come into the house of the Lord. Now, there's we don't often actually hear about it very much today. It's reflected in some of the texts, but it's not something that kind of comes up. But the libations that were made as a form of worship, I know there was a huge water libation that was done in the temple. How is this being referenced here? Are they talking specifically about was there a form of worship that was a wine libation, or was it just something that each person could do should they wish to make an offering?
There were wine libations, exactly. I mean, that was a normal type of sacrifice. And like you said, we don't mention it often because usually the animal and the grain sacrifices take center stage. And the water libation during Sukkot gets a lot of press for other reasons. But there were also wine sacrifices that were used. And the fancy English word for doing a wine sacrifice is libation.
It's a good word. But they're saying that there's no point doing that. That it's not going to be accepted, and even the bread that's being brought, it's saying that it's no good. It's not going to be accepted as a sacrifice. Keep it for yourself. The Creator's not interested in having that. But what does the phrase "bread of mourners"? Where does that come from?
Funny you should ask that. So, as I'm sure you're going to be startled to hear, the commentators are divided about how to translate this phrase, which means that it sounds like it's talking about people that are mourners, and the concept here, if you read it in that line, would be to say mourners who have come into contact with the dead, which in the ancient world was, of course, everyone who was mourner. You didn't have the modern system of funeral homes taking care of the preparations. That was what the family and friends would do. So they have become ritually defiled because they have been in contact with the deceased, literal contact with the deceased. Therefore, anything they touch becomes a second degree of ritual impurity, and that means their bread is defiled. So for anyone else to eat their food is to come into a tertiary level of ritual impurity. So the idea here would be to say, the bread that you've got, and it's sort of like going back up to the idea of the grain prostitute, is what you have received is defiling, and what you have received is unclean. It may look like it's going to be supporting you, but it's actually defiling you, and God wants nothing of it. And the metaphor that's being used here, the thing that's really interesting about it, if you're translating it as mourners, is it's clear that the metaphor was still relevant to the people, even if they weren't keeping other parts of the Torah and God's laws. That is, people still did have an idea that the food that the mourners had touched had become ritually impure because of the contact with the dead, and they were still observing that, even if they weren't observing don't steal, don't murder, don't commit adultery, and all the other things. So it's just a very interesting reminder that people don't become completely severed from all aspects of a religion. They often will hold on to certain parts, even while breaking other things.
One of the commentaries said that it literally means bread of robbery. So it can be read that this bread's been kind of taken with might, and it's not something that has been given to them because of their good acts. Right. Rather, they've taken it through their own strength. And
that's exactly what Rashi brings. And he reads the word onim, which is what's being used as mourners here, for being an onen. And he says, no, it's not onim meaning mourners, it's onim meaning their power, their strength. And he says, what would be the bread of strength? The bread that you took by strength? That's called the bread of robbery. And of course, if you get something by bullying and stealing it from someone else, then that is also wrong, and no one wants, and God doesn't want to have any part of that.
Verse 5. What will you do for the appointed day and for the day of the Lord's massacre? Now this kind of sounds like an out-and-out threat. That it's coming. You better have a plan. What are you going to do?
So what's going to happen? But this verse 5 is a fun one to try and translate, because if you read your translation again, and then I'll give you a contrast.
All right, sure. What will you do for the appointed day and for the day of the Lord's massacre?
Right. So an alternative translation would be, what will you do about feast days, about the festivals of the Lord?
Wow.
Yes. So the problem is, how do you translate moed, which is literally time, but moed is often being translated not just as time, but as in capital T, capital the time, meaning festivals or appointed days that are set aside. And then you have Chag, which at the end is being used for festival, but some of the commentators are saying that doesn't really fit with the flow, so this must be talking more about the slaughtering of the Chag, the massacre, rather than the Chag, rejoicing Chag.
Yeah, that's straight down the middle, because I'm looking at it here. It says the Lord's massacre, and then in Hebrew it says Chag, and it says the slaughter, the killing which I have in you. Yeah, I mean, how are we supposed to... See, this is that difficult argument. How are we supposed to know that the more difficult translation of massacre is the one that you should go for when it maybe isn't really obvious in the reading? You
don't know.
Okay.
So, I mean, that's the short answer, but a very complicated underlying issue. So there's I don't know, maybe we should do, after Hosea, we'll do a little break and look at the nature of prophecy and as a whole, because it might help for the overall project. But Rambam does a very important service when he tries to explain in the Guide for the Perplexed that the prophets didn't always receive a secret decoder ring to explain exactly what it was that they were sharing with the people, the message. Sometimes they do. It's Ezekiel holds up 2 sticks and God says, do you know what this means? And he says, not really. He says, let me tell you what it means. And then we get the explanation. But more often we get prophecies that are simply the vision and the words that the prophet felt compelled to share by their vision with God, or their vision of God. And they don't always come with that decoder ring to tell you exactly what each part of the metaphor and vision means. Sometimes the prophet himself may not have been 100% aware of every implication of what they were saying. They only knew that this had to be shared. And that means that there's going to be room for discussion, debate, and interpretation. And that's okay. Because maybe I should just do that one little of why that's okay, is because ultimately we don't make our decisions about how to live our life only on the books of the prophets. We make it based on the root of Torah and the debate and discussion of how to apply that we find in rabbinic literature. And the prophets inspire and guide us, but they're not there to give us the final answer of what do I do today.
Very good. No, it's a great idea about going back and having a look, especially under the instruction of the Guide for the Perplexed. It's on my list. And only that people often say you should read that, but wow, it's a hard read, and that puts me off.
Well, it starts off especially hard because he does a lot of terminology, which is very off-putting because most people don't like reading dictionaries. But it's incredibly important terminology. I mean, he goes through and really cleans up a lot of the misconceptions regarding some of the basic words in Hebrew that are talking about God and everything. But then after he finishes that, he then gets into some Aristotelianism and other issues of science for his day, and then he comes back around and gets into some of the bigger, heavier philosophical issues that I think more people would find rewarding. But you got to work your way till section 3 to get there.
All right. Well, that's definitely on the list. You can look forward to that at home. Now, verse 6. For behold, they have gone away because of plunder. Egypt shall gather them. I'm going to say morph. No, you know what? Maybe I'm
No,
going to try and figure.
Mof is fine. It's an Egyptian
Morph,
word.
okay.
Right? And
Right,
mof is an
okay.
Egyptian word, so I'm not going to correct you too much, but the Hebrew pronounces it mof.
Mof. Shall bury them. It's another word for Egypt. I did read that far. The treasure houses for their silver thistles shall inherit them, briars in their dwellings.
It's actually saying because they will have been carried away as captives, their homes, their possessions, that which they treasured, will be overrun by weeds.
Oh. So it's literally talking about weeds.
Yeah, the only people who will inherit your home are the weeds and the shrubs. Your children will be gone. You will be gone. There will be an end to you.
Yeah, sure.
We definitely know that the word is not silver thistle, because the trope makes it very clear that the word that's for their silver and the word for thistle are in two separate phrases. So yeah, definitely not a compound word.
Great. Okay. The days of the visitation have arrived. The days of recompense have arrived. Let Israel know the prophet shall be a fool. The man of the spirit mad. This is because of your great iniquity, and the hatred is great. Now we're not talking about Hosea here as a prophet, right? We're talking about their prophets, Israel's leaders that are telling them that the way you're going is good and everything's going to be fine.
Right, the false prophets, exactly.
Right.
Little bit of Hebrew, Yiddish, and maybe even in your modern listeners' lexicon, the word that's used in this verse, meshuga, like meshugana.
Oh, right. Okay.
This is our one of our places from it.
Okay, that's interesting. Meshugana. I always assumed that was a Yiddish word rather than a Hebrew word. But
well, Yiddish and Hebrew Yiddish is a dialect of German and Hebrew combined.
Ephraim is a prophet with my God. For the prophet they lay a fowler's snare on all his ways, causing hatred in the house of his God. And I'm assuming that because of the amount of bracketed words in this, yours might be a little bit different.
It's pretty similar.
Okay.
So, the idea of Ephraim watches for his God, which is where they're getting the first notion of prophecy. And then as for the prophet, the fowler snares are on all his paths, harassment in the house of his God.
We had a fowler's snare a couple of shows ago as well, that they were going to be pulled out of the heavens like a fowler's snare, someone that catches birds.
Right, the doves who don't know their way home.
Right, yeah. Can you explain a little on why Ephraim is a prophet? Who is the my in this? Are we talking from Hosea's lips now? Because if Ephraim is a prophet, maybe the description for what a prophet is something a little bit different in this passage.
So the idea here is that they are Ephraim is again the stand-in for the northern kingdom, for the entire people up there, not just that one tribe. But how we translate the looking for my God or is a prophet for my God. So first of all, we have to point out that the word is not actually used as prophet. The second half of the verse, definitely we get the word navi, which literally means prophet. But Sophia here is being translated as prophet in your translation, and my translation is watch. It's an idea of insight or looking, which is associated with prophecy, but not the actual word for prophecy, if that makes sense.
That does, because navi is kind of like a spokesperson, right? It's the person that's speaking on behalf of the Creator. And I can see why they'd go with prophet here, but maybe it's more of like watchman, I think you said.
Right. So, one way to translate this would be to say that Ephraim is seeking or looking for my God, meaning Hosea's God, but instead their prophet is, being caught by all of these snares in the house of his god, meaning the idolatrous gods.
Right, okay. That does make more sense when you read it that way. Because Ephraim's prophets are going after fake gods, and every direction that they're being guided in is resulting in badness and
Right.
not good things. Okay. They have deeply corrupted themselves, as in the days of Gibeah. And I really should have a load of post-its on the side of my screen with a phonetic, because I wrestle with them every time. I think it's Gibeah. Okay. They have deeply corrupted themselves, as in the days of Gibeah. He shall remember their iniquity, and he shall visit their sins. The he in this is the creator.
Yes. This is God, capital H-E. So this idea of Gibeah, one of the interpretations of this is referring back to the story of Benjamin and the concubine in the chapter 9 of the book of Judges, which, if you don't know that story, good, because it's a really, really horrible story, where the Benjamites sort of mass rape this woman, and then the visitor, whose concubine it was, cuts her up and sends the pieces all around to the different tribes, and then they all come and make war against Benjamin and wipe them all out, and they say, oh, but dear, now what are they going to do? Because we've all made an oath that they can't marry our families. Well, we'll just let them come and steal our daughters to marry. It's just so messed up. And that's one of the things, is that it was so messed up that the people were clearly falling in the wrong direction. And that this is kind of being used, at least according to one translation, that's why Giva is being used here as things are as bad now as those people. And that was like the story that everybody remembers as being completely wrong.
I have to admit, I did remember that something that happened to Benjamin that kind of resulted in them petering out, but I didn't know that was what it was. Wow, that's horrendous. 10. Like grapes in the desert, I found Israel, like a ripe fig on a fig tree in its beginning. I saw your forefathers. They came to Baal Peor, and they separated themselves to a shameful thing, and they became detestable when they loved. I mean, it starts off actually sounding kind of good. I imagine that grapes and ripe figs are excellent things to find.
And that's the idea, right?
When it says they separated themselves to a shameful thing, is there a specific shameful thing here that starts it all off?
Oh, absolutely. That's the reference to Baal Peor, where the story picks up. If you remember, after the story of Balaam and the talking donkey, which everyone remembers so well, the Moabites come back and seduce the men of Israel with their women towards idolatry.
Yes.
So that's the problem here. And then you get Pinchas with his act of righteous indignation.
And his javelin.
Exactly. So that's, whenever Baal Peor comes up, that's what is being referenced. And so here, again, we're going back to our very first verse, the idea of Israel lusting and whoring after the ways of the other nations. And that's like God said, look, I found you in the wilderness and you were wonderful and we had this great relationship, and then next thing I know, you're off with these other women and these other idols, these other gods. Yeah. And everything that had been good became bad. And by the way, the last little bit of that phrase can be translated either as they became horrible or detestable or disgusting as they or in their love, like as they were involved in this licentious behavior, or you can say they became as detestable as detestable as they had been loved, meaning they had gone a complete 180.
Oh, I see. Okay.
As much as I had loved them, now did I detest them.
That's very good. I like that one. It reads very well too. And that's the reason why the Moabites cannot enter into the assembly of the Lord.
I would only add to that, could not enter into the assembly, because there are no more known Moabites
sure.
in the for the last 2,000 years. That was an issue that was brought up and settled during the days of the Talmud.
11. As for Ephraim, their honor shall fly away like a bird, from birth, from the womb, or from conception. Now, that sounds like there's an awful lot going on in there, but I have... okay, so Ephraim, their honor shall fly away like a bird. Just saying that from the moment that they're born, no. From their womb, no. From the very moment that they conceive a new person, that the honor of that person is gone.
Right. It's not a question of... eventually things are going to be bad. It's just, it's already spoiled.
They're a bad seed.
It's not a question of, again, it's the kivul dam, it's their glory. It's not a question of necessarily being like bad seed, like prone to wickedness. Mm-hmm. It's just, they are on the path as an entire nation, so that their children aren't even going to get a chance to recover and build better. And the glory, which is what they treasure most, is already flying away. And so they think we're going to build this great country and give it to our children and all those things. And it's like the children who are even yet unborn will have already been robbed of the honor they could have had because of your behavior.
For if they raise their children, I will bereave them before they can become men. For woe to them also when I turn away from them. So it was talking about... eradicating and cutting them off before they can become a people. Right.
So reading the last verse 11, in a more literal way, and the idea that you won't even get to bear your children, right? You won't even be, the conception won't even take, because your nation will be so destitute. Even if they grow, even if they are born, they're not going to reach adulthood. So it's doubling down on that threat.
Ephraim, as I saw Tyre, is planted in a dwelling place, but Ephraim is busy taking his children out to the slayer. Now Tyre is a place.
Correct. It's an interesting translation.
Okay.
I'm trying to think of... So the translation that I have, which is I think... well, equally, but we'll go through it. Is it shall go with Ephraim as I have seen it go with Tyre, which was planted in a meadow. Ephraim too must bring out his children to the slaughter, or to the slayers. Right. So the idea being that Tyre was considered to be a wealthy and strong city, but it was destroyed, and Ephraim too will be destroyed like it. And the idea of bringing out the children, there's a couple different variations on that, but the one I seem to think is a nice solid one is that they will have to send their children out to war, and they will be slaughtered.
Give them, O Lord, what you will give. Give them a bereaving womb and dry breasts. Again, analogies to the children,
right?
Not even surviving childbirth.
Or infancy, exactly.
Yep. All their evil is in Gilgal, for there I hated them. For the evil of their deeds, I will drive them out of my house. I will not continue to love them. All their princes are rebellious. Ephraim has been smitten. Their root is dry. They shall not produce fruit. Even when they give birth, I will slay the precious ones of their womb. It's really driving it home.
Yes.
My God shall reject them, because they did not obey him, and they shall be wandering among the nations. Which again, I guess, is a little nudge again towards exile.
Yes, exactly right.
So there we go, boys and girls. That was chapter 9. Join us next time for chapter 10. Again, if you've questions or comments or ideas on things you want us to cover, please leave them in the comments below. You will find on the screens right now a link to Rabbi Neely's YouTube channel. You can head over there and have a look at some of his videos. He puts at least 2 new videos up every week. You can go and enjoy those. Thank you very much, Rabbi Neely, for your time and your experience.
Thank you, Jason.
Enjoy these shows very much, and we'll see you guys very soon. Bye-bye.
Bye.